Welcome to another top whatever type video. This is the top 4, because I only can find 4 and think of 4 for this particular one. These are the top 4 cinematic universes I would love to see actually happen. Now, I've heard that there was one that was going to be on this list, but this one's actually finally getting some traction after about 3 years, and that's the Valiant universe. Yeah, that is finally getting to the silver screen, and of course also I was thinking the same thing for Hellboy, which for some people that's the direction that the Legendary is going to go, because they're going to reboot the franchise. Because the original plans for Hellboy 3 were scrapped because, well, there's a few different reasons. The biggest one is because Guillermo del Toro wanted a $250 million budget for this film, because he was going to go all apocalyptic. Now we're just going to reboot, and now maybe we get a chance to see a cinematic universe for Hellboy. This is something basically a lot of people wanted to see, and looks like that's where they're going to go. But yeah, there are other ones I'd like to see. Now, I've heard rumblings of possibly a Robin Hood cinematic universe, which in itself makes no sense at all, because Robin Hood is a standalone story. You don't need a cinematic universe for frickin' Robin Hood. Yeah, it makes no sense. Robin Hood does not need one. I definitely think King Arthur doesn't really need one. Not that I can think of, no. But definitely Robin Hood is a big no, because it's unnecessary. If you want to do a Robin Hood film, fine. Don't do a cinematic universe and having characters from the original story get their own standalone stuff, because here's kind of the thing. That is something that nobody is interested in at all. And of course, Sony is trying to start up their own cinematic universe again with the Spider-Man stuff, even though they've tried that and it didn't work. Yeah, they're trying. Right now, there are 2 films in the pipeline right now. Yeah, there's a Silver Sable and Black Cat film, which in itself makes no reason to be under Sony. I'm thinking, though, Spider-Man is shared by Spider-Man, Marvel, and Sony are sharing the character. Why not share the rest of his Why not share the rest of his characters? And it's kind of the same thing with Venom. It makes no sense, basically, to do Venom without Spider-Man. Yeah, it makes no sense. But despite that, let's get into my top 4. Okay, my number 4 is Stephen King. This one is not comic book related. This is of course due to his novels. Yes, I do know about Dark Tower, and I'm looking forward to seeing with Matthew McConaughey, Idris Elba. It looks really interesting from the trailers. And this is one of my most anticipated movies, because I haven't read anything from Dark Tower, but from what I've read from it, it sounds so interesting. And also the fact that this particular thing has references to other known Stephen King stories, and there's a long histories of novels. There's about 10 novels of Dark Tower, along with about 20 or 30 different comic books, a lot of whom written by the awesome Peter David. I just haven't had a chance to read them because I'm reading other stuff right now. So, yeah. But when it comes to Stephen King, I definitely do think you can do a cinematic universe, because sometimes his characters do come back in their books. Like there was an example very recently. There was one called Dr. Sleep. The main character of that book is was the little boy from the book The Shining. Basically, some people would think of The Shining. People would think of Jack Nicholson taking an axe, banging through a bathroom door, and saying, "Here's Johnny." Yeah, of course that was a play on basically Johnny Carson, of how he had introduction on his talk show. Yeah. That's what people immediately think of. People think of the Cuba version a lot of the time, but the original novel, the little boy from that novel, basically is the main character of Dr. Sleep. And here's one thing that's interesting about Stephen King's books. They all take place in the same place, so why not? They all take place in Maine. I mean, you could easily shoot all the films in Maine, because all the books take place in Maine. I mean, there isn't a single book I can think of that takes place in Maine. I think one I can think of, aside from Dark Tower, does take place in Maine, and that's 11/23/63. the one that was adapted into that critically acclaimed Hulu show with James Franco as the main character. I've read the novel. Here's kind of the thing. When I think of Stephen King, I think of supernatural horror, not time travel. That is something I don't think of. Yeah, but doing something for Stephen King, like making his books connected. His books have a very loose connection to each other. Excuse me, but the biggest connection is location, which is Maine. Which, when people think of places across the country, basically for stories set, people don't think of Maine. And yet, Stephen King is basically known for doing this. He's done this for years. So I definitely do think that Stephen King, basically, since well, we have It coming, which I'm looking forward to that as well. So we have 2 Stephen King movies I'm looking forward to this year. It, I think, is coming later this year. Dark Tower, I think, is coming later this month. I believe it is. I have to look it up, but yeah. But Stephen King definitely would work. Just, you have a location, you can just have it where characters from the other films just walk into it, just like, hey, we have to take place in the same universe. You might do an original story where some of these characters might team up to take on one of the monsters. That might be interesting, kind of like we do with Avengers. But Stephen King does... The Stephen King books does lead credence to basically, even though pretty much almost all of his books have been adapted to like movies and mini series over the years, just connect them. Just even though the connection is very loose, but there's plenty of potential there to make a cinematic universe of the Stephen King novels. So yes, this is definitely one. All right, that was number 4. Number 3 is Image Comics. Now, the only thing is Image Comics that's ever been adapted to live action, actually has been 2 things. Spawn and Witchblade. And that's it. Just those 2. Image Comics, there is plenty of potential to do a cinematic universe. Though I do know about the reboot, about Spawn, about what Tom McFarlane wants to do with it. And horror stuff, that's fine because, well, being a horror film, that's perfectly fine because... Spawn is a supernatural-based character, putting horror into the film. But the way he's describing it, from what I've heard, it's not something a lot of people like be interested in. People like... Now, I've seen the original Spawn, not when it came out, though, because when it came out, I was 9 when it came out, so I wasn't able to see it in theaters. I later saw it on VHS. I gotta say, it was actually a pretty dang good movie. I mean, the special effects are pretty good for late 90s standards, but a lot of people agree the CGI for Hell was atrociously bad. And just by sheer coincidence, the following year was Blade. Yeah, Blade came 1 year later. Yes, there's one thing that Spawn and Blade have in common. The main character is black. No, seriously, Al Simmons is black. And the thing is, Image basically has plenty of characters you can do that are superhero related. You can do a cinematic universe with. I mean, obviously you would start with Spawn. I would also throw in Savage Dragon, which I've heard, not that one, but I heard that Invincible, I've heard rumblings that might be adapted soon. Possibly into a TV show. Walking Dead, no. That can stick to its own thing. But these following things can fit into its own cinematic universe. Spawn, Savage Dragon, Youngblood. Yes, I'm talking about Youngblood because Youngblood may have turned recently. And props that can fix other problems that Rob Liefeld created. Did with the characters back in 1982. Excuse me, but who knows? I would also throw in Witchblade as well, because Witchblade technically does take place in the same universe as Spawn and Savage Dragon, though for some reason, Youngblood technically isn't currently. It's set in its own universe. But you can use the early stuff and just make a lot of changes, because some of the stuff basically from back then really makes no sense. I've read the original Youngblood books, and these things are hilariously bad. Not like atrociously bad, they are hilariously bad. But that's Rob Liefeld for you. But I would just start with these 4 properties here. So Youngblood, Savage Dragon, Spawn, and Witchblade. Start with these 4. Now Witchblade is exactly 23 years old. So, and this one has been adapted before into a short-lived TV show. Witchblade could definitely work. I mean, you can sort of have it connected the way Marvel has it with their TV show. You can have Witchblade on TV, dealing with supernatural stuff. You can have Spawn and Savage Dragon in the movies. You can have Savage Dragon. We can have Savage Dragon also on TV as well. Depends on basically what they want to do. But there's plenty of potential to do an Image cinematic universe. Just gotta get the characters going. I mean, the only things from Image has been adapted so far recently that's still around is Walking Dead. Outcast got recently adapted, which I haven't watched Outcast because it's on a network I don't have, so I can't watch it. Walking Dead, I haven't watched it since I've watched the first 3 episodes of season 1, and the series is going to be going to season 8 soon. So just use the superhero stuff for Image and try to fit that into a cinematic universe. Just try to do it similar to how Marvel is, but don't carbon copy it. Okay, so the first 4 properties you should try to adapt into a movie or some kind of TV show would be Spawn, Savage Dragon, Youngblood, and Witchblade. And then later on you can spin their own mini franchises within, but overall have them all simply connected to the same universe. Either do a movies or do a TV show. Spawn basically works well as both a movie. I'm not really sure if it works well as a TV show because of the limited budget. Witchblade has proven it does work with a TV budget because it's had a TV show before. They'll get canceled after like a couple of seasons, but it depends upon what Hollywood wants to do with this stuff. Okay. Is Zenescope. Now, Zenescope for a lot of people basically is just it's just turning some known characters that are normally male from the actual fairy tale stories into sexy females, like how Robin Hood is a woman, Van Helsing is a woman, and of course Red Riding Hood is a badass. Doing a cinematic universe of Zenescope, this will be a challenge because unlike Image, they require some CGI for Witchblade, Witchplague, and Spawn, and maybe Savage Dragon, but not much for Youngblood. But in the case of Zenescope, you're gonna have to use a lot of CGI. But I think some of the stuff can be limited to a TV budget. It just depends upon if they wanted to adapt it or not. I mean, here's the thing about the company itself. Zenescope has only been around since 2005. Unlike Image, it's been around since 1992. And of course, Stephen King's around writing since the 70s. Zenescope is only 12 years old. It's a 12-year-old company. As far as now, the only licensing that's not related to the Zenescope universe is Charmed. They had briefly the license to Charmed, and they published 2 seasons of it. And then for some reason they stopped after 2 seasons. And now for some strange reason Dynamite has the license to publish it, which is weird. Yeah, but who knows? But Zenescope could definitely work. You have to require some CGI, mainly for some of the creatures that pop up in these stories. Like, for example, Grimm fairy tales can function like the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits. That could be adapted to a TV show right there. I would say in the case of Grimm fairy tales, that one could also... Now, mainly, I think in the case of Zenescope, you could probably do TV show stuff with this thing. Just pick a network and just make it... Well, Grimm fairy tales, when you read it, when it started off as an anthology comic book. And around issue 50, they actually kind of stopped that. And it basically became a regular storyline type of series. And then after issue 100, they stopped that. And then it became basically kind of like a version of Harry Potter. Doing the whole high school stuff. But recently, the book has been relaunched. And it's about 6 issues. And it's pretty good. And it's basically... the daughter of the original main character, Sheila, I think her name is. She was the main character. She was the main protagonist of the first volume. She died at the end of the previous volume. So they decided to have her daughter, who was actually born in the previous volume, have an older version of her, and just have her basically take over her mother's job. And it's a great premise. I've been reading it. It's really good. Not many people talk about Zenescope because Zenescope is one of the more smaller independent companies, but I mainly found out about them through Comic Frontline. And in the past, like, 3 years, since 2014 was a year basically I got into a few different companies. I got into Zenescope, I got into Valiant. Yeah, those two I'm a little bit into Boom right now, but I'm not reading my stuff from Boom. Mainly in the case of Valiant and Zenescope. I read pretty much everything these companies put out because they don't put out that much. And in the case of Valiant, I've read pretty much everything that the company's put out since 2012, but I've only been reading since 2014. I managed to get through a lot really quickly. Zenescope, kind of the same thing. I've mostly everything done, but not everything. Excuse me. Yeah. But I think Zenescope would work, mainly on a TV budget and using, I would not suggest using CGI for some of the creatures that pop up in the Grimm Fairy Tales comic book. I would suggest using men in suits. Use suit stuff. I mean, Doctor Who was known for doing this since the 60s. So, I don't see why Grimm Fairy Tales can't do it. Yeah. And of course, Robin Hood could be its own separate things. It could be spin off it. And have it set in New York City. I mean, I read the comic book was really, really good. They've had 2 recent comic books. They had the ongoing series, which Pat Shannon wrote, which was really good. And there's Robin Hood Live in New York. The comic was really good as well. A lot of these comics definitely work on TV, definitely. Especially with the increased technology we've had in the past several years. Normally, when you think of stuff like this, try to adapt something like Zenescope. The first thing people come through is adapting to a movie. But Zenescope works better as a TV show shared universe. It could definitely work. It's very simple. Just don't spend too much on CGI. You can use CGI very sparingly. Kind of like on the CW, they don't use CGI that much. I mean, look at Arrow. Arrow very rarely uses it. Flash does use it. But they don't use it all the time. The one show that uses it a lot, and they have to use it, is Legends of Tomorrow. Yeah. So, that's all I gotta say about Zenescope. But basically, this will work very well as a TV show stuff. Okay? And finally, my number 1 is Pulp Heroes. This is the one I've always wanted to see. Pulp Heroes, there have been a few Pulp Heroes that have been adapted to movies. The only few that have been adapted to movies have been The Shadow with Alec Baldwin, which was an awesome movie. I highly recommend it. It's really, really good. The only thing I don't like about it is him basically having invisibility powers, which was bizarre. There's The Rocketeer, who is not from the original Pulp era. He made his debut back in the 80s. I think Matt Wagner created him. Awesome character. I've only read like a couple of his miniseries so far, but I love the film. Where Timothy Dalton is the main villain. I mean, how can you not pass a movie with Timothy Dalton? Yeah, there's been The Phantom, which I've heard is written by the guy who wrote the script. Also did Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've never seen the film, so I have no opinion on it. And then of course there's the Green Hornet, which it is kind of bad, but it's not like really, really bad. It's hilariously bad. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. Even though I've only seen the film once, it goes way over the top. And I have heard that they're going to do a reboot of Green Hornet, which I've heard that the director is a huge Green Hornet fan. So I hope that basically he does something justice with him. But Green Hornet does not work well in modern day. Him along with the other pulp heroes work best in the 30s and 40s, in the golden age of pulp stories. Maybe the 50s. That's pushing it. So you have 3 decades worth of stories, basically 3 decades worth of opportunity to set this stuff in. But The Rocketeer only works best mainly in the 1940s. That's just my personal thing. Where you can have it basically set so you can start from 1939 and wrap it up in 1945. But there's also plenty of story you can do there. But if you're going to do a pulp hero shared universe, I would suggest starting with The Shadow, Green Hornet, and The Rocketeer. Now, what about Flash Gordon? He's kind of considered a pulp hero. You can kind of do him, but I would have him sort of separate, sort of the King universe stuff. Basically, something separate from the main pulp hero stuff. Basically, the hard-hitting, gritty stuff. You can have those things sort of separately, but you don't have to have them connected. For the King stuff, basically do like that. Do what the King's Quest series did, where you had Flash Gordon, Zorban, I think his name is, the scientist who works with him, Mandrake the Magician, the 2 Phantoms. Yeah, those 2 Phantoms. Yeah, they had this recently in the King one-shots. And Prince Valiant. Yep, you take those characters, put them in their own separate universe, and take the other ones that basically people may or may not know about. Like, when people think of when we think of a character like the Spider, when you look at him, he looks like Spider-Man. And from what I've read, Stanley got inspiration from the Spider for Spider-Man. Just like how Bob Kane and Bill Finger got the inspiration Batman from the Shadow. Dan Garrett got inspiration from the Phantom. Yeah. So basically, a lot of the characters that we know of, Batman, Spider-Man, and of course the Blue Beetle, take their inspiration from famous pulp characters. Like in the case of Shadow, will people think he's a rip-off of Batman? No. And there's a very good reason why. Shadow kills people. Yeah, the Shadow kills people. He uses guns. I mean, the guy basically dresses in a suit, has a scarf around his face, and wears a black fedora hat, and carries 2 pistols. Though some people might think he might be the Hood. Yeah, he's a C-list Marvel villain. But the thing is, he doesn't wear a red cloak. He wears a red scarf. And this one, now, a pulp hero universe would definitely work, but it would be expensive. It probably, out of everything I've mentioned, this is probably the most expensive thing because you gotta have it set in the 30s, a lot of it. Except the Rocketeer, you gotta have that set in World War II. Though, I think you can easily pull it off doing another one of those, thanks to the success of Captain America First Avenger. I would suggest having characters like the Shadow, all the other characters that... Now, I mean, there's other pulp characters after Shadow Green Hornet. There's also the Spider, which I have mentioned. There's also Miss Fury, who is a female pulp hero. She's basically the pulp hero version of of Catwoman. I have no idea if she was inspired by Catwoman or if Catwoman was inspired by her. I don't know. I don't know the backstory about Catwoman. But, and basically, if you want to do like a crossover type of thing, there's 2 ways you can do it. Kind of similar to Avengers. Basically, there's this mini-series called Mask. There's been 2 of them. I've only read the second one. Where they take a lot of the pulp heroes, stick them together, and have them solve mystery. You can have it like the Avengers, but don't do like having them fight random monsters from the sky. Don't do that. Have them fight mobsters in the 30s and 40s. It would be perfect. But I would definitely start off with the Green Hornet and Shadow first. I would definitely throw in Doc Savage because he works in that setting as well. There's also a character that, if you're going to use him, you can't call the movie The Avenger because people are thinking, is it related to the Avengers? No. Just call it Justice Inc. Yeah, just call it Justice Inc. featuring the Avenger. Yeah, because anytime this character is trying to have a comic book, he has to use the name Justice Inc. as part of the title of his comic book. DC Basic was first to publish this, and the reason why it's called Justice Inc. so that people, because they can't call it the Avenger, because people think they're confused with Marvel's Avengers. Yeah, because people so agree with Avenger stuff that just call it the film Justice Inc. With the subtitle featuring the Avenger. Yeah. Now, I don't know who would be going to play these characters, but I would suggest for the Shadow, if you're going to do a reboot of that one, have Alec Baldwin come in to play the Shadow's father. Or basically have play an associate of the Shadow. And be sort of a passing of the torch. And give a good, nice nod to the original film. How beautiful it was. I mean, of the original 3 pulp hero films that came out in the early 90s, the Shadow, I've heard from one person, Oliver Harper, I think his name is, who did a review of the Shadow. The Shadow was most gorgeous of the 3 films, though he pointed out that the Rocketeer had a more interesting story. But I might disagree with him, but I do enjoy the Shadow. But if you're going to adapt the Shadow again, please do not give him invisibility powers, because that was quite stupid. One of the reasons why I say that it might be expensive to do pulp hero set in the 30s and 40s is because you got to use CGI to basically, or because you had to use a lot of CGI to recreate New York City, because a lot of these pulp characters are set in New York City, and the thing has to look like 1930s New York. That's why it's kind of expensive. The Rocketeer, you don't have to set that one in New York, but a lot of the other characters you have to set in New York City. I'm not really sure. In the case of the Green Hornet, he's generally set in Central City, like the Spirit. So, yeah. Though you can have Central City kind of near New York. That's kind of like how in the DC universe, where Gotham City is generally near New York City. But, excuse me. But you can definitely do it. The Spirit Days basically trying to do the Spirit again. Now I know that the Frank Miller film was bad, but if you try to do a better version of that and try to adapt some of the comic books that Dynamite published, it'd be a much better film. Just focus on stuff published with Dynamite while also owning stuff that Will Eisner and don't make it like Sin City. Do not do that again. That was stupid. And don't if you're gonna use the octopus, don't use a big name like Samuel Jackson again, because even the guy even though when you watch the film he has a blast playing the character, but the character is an anagram of two different characters. The octopus is some other character. Now the octopus is generally seen when you see in the comic, all you see is his gloves. That is it. That's all you see of him. And the octopus is generally considered to be the main villain of the Spirit. But trying to do a cinematic universe, all these characters, would work. Just pick the right studio to do it. I mean, I know Legendary is trying to do stuff with the Godzilla and King Kong stuff, but what studio could do it? Well, Paramount's trying to do Hasbro, and I know that Sony is trying to do Valiant. I wouldn't mind Paramount trying to get a hand of the Pulp Hero stuff. That would be interesting. I mean, there's nothing that says that they can't use the Pulp Heroes, because here's the thing. Except for the Rocketeer, all of them are public domain characters. Yeah, the Rocketeer is the only one who's not, because here's the thing. His creator is still alive. No, seriously, if you look it up, because his character made his debut in the early 80s, and the fact the creator is still left alive, that means it does not fall in public domain. He's the only public domain Pope. He's the only non-public domain character. Actually, he's one of two. The other, of course, is the Lali Dama character. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's basically like the Green Hornet, where he's green. He's never had a series that I can think of published by Dynamite, but he did appear in the series Mash 2. I've heard that he is actually owned by the family who actually created him back in the 30s and 40s. But trying to get legal rights for him might be more difficult than, let's say, getting legal rights for, let's say, the Shadow or these other characters. So yeah, just call it the Pulp Hero Cinematic Universe. And I'm sure some people would love to see the Shadow on screen again. I mean, but I would also suggest prior to releasing the Shadow film, you can do a reboot. Re-release the original 90s film. It is really good. You can make some good buck on it. Okay? But, that's all I gotta say about this. But, stay tuned for more top whatevers. But this one I actually really wanted to do. Now, I still am planning to do the comic history one. We'll talk about Infinity Inc. That one's going to be done soon. But not right now. Okay? But until I see you all in my next video. Okay? Bye.